Maybe for the few people that aren't aware of you, what you've done in the past from the Freedom Convoy, but all the other things that you're also doing, maybe give them some background of what you're doing and who you are, and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I guess most people in the Bitcoin space know me because of this event, the Canadian Trucker Convoy, which I believe was instrumental in helping draw attention to Bitcoin on the global stage, because it was the first time where that hyperbolic scenario that we would all say, when the government became tyrannical, but many of us never really believed that would happen in the West, let alone countries like Canada. But as you learn the story here, that's exactly what happened. And Bitcoin is really, it's the only money that was not frozen and captured by the government. It's the only money that was distributed to the truckers. Of all the cumulatively approximately $25 million that was raised for the truckers during those 3 weeks, only Bitcoin was distributed directly to the truckers, thanks to Caribou and a couple of people on the ground. And that's what made all the difference. So I hope, I wrote this book with the idea and the hopes that people will look about the way they'll look at in the future, in the next 10 to 20 years afterwards. I think, when people become nostalgic for the past, that's really what it's written for. So people, as Bitcoin swallows more and more of the economy, they can look back at one of the many origin stories of Bitcoin. And I think that's one of the things that really changed the perception of Bitcoin, especially amongst the normies. At Bitcoin 22 or 23? I think it was 20. I don't remember, one of those years. The first year that Robert F. Kennedy was there, he was on stage, and what did he say? He said it was when he saw what happened to the truckers that that's what made him realize and understand that we need a separation from money and state in terms of money that the government cannot control. And so it was that moment, because this protest was all over the world. We had copycat protests, I guess you might call them, in almost 40 countries where people were fed up with exactly the same thing. So that's how most people know of me. And they didn't know that prior to the Trucker Convoy, I had gotten involved in politics because I was a small business owner in Toronto. And it was on a university campus. So I saw the switch in culture, like somebody turned on the postmodern switch, and we went from being individualistic or more individualistic to entirely collectivist in our philosophical framing of the world. And things just progressed over the years that I was on the business. I had the business there. And, even our local politicians started regurgitating the same nonsensical rhetoric. And so, like all, entrepreneurial people who might be a little bit more on the creative side, I just thought, hey, why don't I just run for politics and make them look as silly as they are? And I did have some success with that. So that's kind of what, one thing has led to another, and it just became from, hey, just a regular small business guy, got fed up with the political class, got involved in politics, ended up running federally, so met lots of people, understood how the gears of the machine fit together behind the scenes in a way that a lot of people don't really understand. And I'm trying to communicate that to Bitcoiners, to how things actually work. And the next thing I know, I'm in this protest that went global that I never in a million years would have imagined that I would be a part of or even participate in. Small business, more economically minded people, we don't protest. But it just got so ridiculous to the point that there needed to be some sort of pushback that everybody, whether you're left or right or up or down or objectivist or libertarian, something that everybody could say, okay, it's enough, we got to stop. And it was great that Bitcoin was a part of it. I think it was a perfectly natural fit between the philosophy of Bitcoin and the philosophy of what we were trying to accomplish there.
It's interesting because a lot of Bitcoiners look at politics as something we don't need, and I highly disagree with that most of the time, because I think even though Bitcoin might be to a certain degree untouchable from politics because it's global, and like if one government shuts it down, another government might embrace it. But like I think we as individuals are still highly attached to politics and what politics actually does with us. How do you see the importance of getting involved in politics and making your own voice kind of heard in that the government, in that system that maybe we look very critical at?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I hate politics. I happen to be pretty good at it, apparently. The behind the scenes stuff. And if anybody wants to know how politics actually works, watch the TV show House of Cards. You cannot believe how real some of that is. Some of it. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I understand the frustration with Bitcoin doesn't care. I understand that. However, it was the Greek philosopher Parasides that said, just because you don't care about politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you, or something to that effect. I might have jumbled the words. And that is important for us to understand. And, I talked about this at a recent Bitcoin conference where I was on one of the panels. And I try to communicate and explain to people that without getting too political, because it's not about politics, this is about individual sovereignty, safety, and building a life for ourselves. That was the lesson of World War II, and it was also the lesson of the Holocaust, that, the problem is people couldn't escape. It was a different world back then. If you had assets, those assets were easily seized and controlled, whereas if people, that's just one example of genocide. Maybe Rwanda is another one. There's many other ones. That if people understood the importance and the value that Bitcoin brings them, then we might have had many opportunities where people could have escaped that sort of extreme political situation. And yeah, maybe many of those people were not political and figured, what do I care about politics? Well, I think that's the big lesson for it. And I think we can do a lot on the communication front on that in the Bitcoin space. And that's why it is important. Again, I don't like politics, but, we're involved in, I'll use some hyperbolic language, but we're involved in this war with a system. Okay, so if you buy into that frame, then a war has multiple battlefronts. Sun Tzu is The Art of War is a perfect example of a book that will explain much of this and the importance of understanding your enemy and even, getting involved and understanding how to manipulate the enemy's system, which is what you're doing when you're getting involved politically.
And it's dealing with reality. If we leave governments with all the people that just only want to do governments and we're kind of getting out of it, it probably gets worse than better.
Yeah, exactly. I was having this conversation with somebody in Florida last week, that what kind of people go into government? It's not, entrepreneurs, developers, creators. There are some rare exceptions, there's no question. But in general, having known and still know many elected officials, or the majority of politicians who are never elected, who just work behind the scenes as staffers and EAs and consultants and whatever, and lobbyists, you're not getting our best. You're not getting our most creative. We're kind of getting, I don't want to say bottom of the barrel, but we're getting people who have different incentive structures and motivations, usually around ego, sometimes ideology. Do you know what RICE is? The acronym RICE?
Right, no.
So the RICE is an acronym that tries to describe human motivation, the 4 pillars of human motivation, and they are RICE, RICE, which is rewards, ideology, coercion, or ego. Well, so when you look at people in the political space versus people in the entrepreneurial or business space, the motivation systems are usually entirely different. We get this idea that people in politics just want to control everything. It's the opposite. They are cowards. They don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper of a scandal. But it's often ego first, which is the lesson from House of Cards, sometimes reward, that's secondary, or sometimes ideology. So if you understand the motivations of the people that are involved, you can kind of work within the system a little bit better. So they are incentivized entirely differently than Bitcoiners are, right? So, which is why I think we struggle to get Bitcoiners involved in politics, minus a few cases, but most people are like, who cares? It doesn't matter for me. So yeah, I agree that is not the path forward.
What do you think is the impact that Bitcoin will have on politics? I think a lot about that exit valve. Like once we have somewhere where we can go towards, same with the trucker convoy, like what if Bitcoin wasn't there? Then it would be a whole different story. But if we have an exit valve, an escape hatch where we can go, this naturally makes the other system also act differently, because like, if we make a lot of shit, people will just go to the alternative system.
Yeah, I think that's already in play. Like I never would have imagined that, the president of the United States, whether you like him or hate him is not the point, but would be shilling Bitcoin, right? And shilling Bitcoin to the world. And remember how defiant he was about Bitcoin initially, how much he loved the US dollar and the dollar is king. And now he's completely flipped. And it's amazing what happens when people get their bank accounts frozen or seized, which is what happened to him and many members of his family. A few years after, it happened to us when we got all our accounts and assets seized by the government. When we were there in Ottawa, when our accounts were frozen, I was with a friend of mine. We had to, towards the end, had to get out of the red zone. So I went to stay with a friend of mine in a particular area of Ottawa, it's an elderly community. It's basically Florida in the outskirts of Ottawa. And she went to the bank and saw a friend of hers that she knows who works at the bank. And they were just talking, and she said, yeah, it's crazy what's going on. And her friend said, you don't know the half of it. She said, every day we have a lineup of people, and the bank was quite busy, which is what prompted the conversation. She said, every day we have a lineup of senior citizens coming in to try to withdraw their maximum amount that they can withdraw for the day. Because they may not be political, but they don't know what's going on. They just know that the government is seizing bank accounts, and they're just, give me all my money. They'll put it under their mattress. And that is an untold story that nobody in the financial system and nobody in the government or in the legacy media will tell anybody, that in this case in Canada, we had a $1.2 to $1.4 trillion bank run during that period. And that is why Justin Trudeau's own former Liberal, now independent senators in the Senate wouldn't back him to extend what we had was essentially martial law. It's because he was collapsing the economy in real time. So all these things cumulatively, and the suspicion for government, which is, I think, very healthy, has caused people to say, okay, we need some sort of insurance policy. And the best insurance policy that worked during that period was Bitcoin. And now you have the President of the United States and many politicians in the United States now promoting it. Who thought we would be here? Like, you always think, yeah, individual people will just realize what Bitcoin is, they'll buy it, and they'll want to start using it. Well, we're going in the complete opposite way. The most powerful political office in the United States is trying to encourage everybody top down to get involved in Bitcoin. And I think that's very healthy.
Yeah, it surprised me too. Because when I got into Bitcoin in around 2020, my thesis and my theory was governments will buy Bitcoin, central banks will buy Bitcoin, but the very small ones, those who are dependent on the US dollar, those who want to break free from another fiat system, those will be the first one. And El Salvador came, but it's also like a story with two sides, how much they are actually in Bitcoin or not. Yeah. Now having the president of the United States of America being on a Bitcoin conference and shilling Bitcoin to the world, no matter what you think, how much he actually understands Bitcoin or like what's his intentions with it is the pure fact that he pays attention to that niche community speaks volume to me. And I was not like, this was not on my bingo card. This was not on my radar.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's going to be more of this to come in the future, because you know what it does? It allows, and not only that, but also, I know a lot of people in the Bitcoin space are very upset or maybe vocal on, institutions like BlackRock, developing tools for Bitcoin and bringing it to their client base. And my argument is, remember, Bitcoin is for everybody. That whole thing that we talked about for many, many years, that Bitcoin is for everyone. And what it's done is, for the boomers, that whole class of people now, that whole demographic, it lends itself to credibility that the institutions that they have trusted with their pension funds that they know nothing about is now offering a product in Bitcoin. So that has opened the door for me to talk more seriously about Bitcoin, and then shifting from being completely dismissive to, it's just, internet money or video game money, to switching to, it's another asset class. I don't really understand it, but at least now they're primed to have the conversation. And I think that it's important to understand that just because you don't like somebody who is a proponent of Bitcoin doesn't mean it can't be part of the conversation that you use to reach people who were previously not understanding.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just, and I don't share that concern, but a lot of people are concerned that if they're coming in, they're doing weird things with Bitcoin and kind of getting in under their control, similar what kind of happened with gold. And I don't think that will ever happen with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a digital asset, so you can verify it easily and you can do a lot more things than you can do with gold. But there is some concerns that those institutions kind of, Satoshi Nakamoto in the beginning with how was it called, the WikiLeaks, he was cautious with like, do we want that big of attention that early on? And then granted now Bitcoin is way bigger already and way more robust, but there's some concerns saying like, do we want BlackRock and huge institutions already in Bitcoin? I say yes. I think Bitcoin is here to stay and should be tested, but there's like some concern of like, what is their intention? They just want to make money with fees, or do they want to have something else also?
Yeah, and listen, of course they want to make money with fees, because I don't think they just decided on their own, okay, I like Bitcoin. There became an organic demand that we helped drive. And we helped drive by drawing attention to it. And that, who was it who said that the chief marketing officer for Bitcoin was Justin Trudeau when he froze all our bank accounts, right? So all of these factors cumulatively have driven the investor class to say, hey, Larry, do you have Bitcoin? Because if you don't have Bitcoin, I'm going to go to an investment house that does. Because look at all these years of gains that I've lost out on because we are stubborn. And the whole principle of being a wise investor is to be open to every possible opportunity. So I think the fact that it was organically driven is another untold story that I think we'll learn more about in the future.
And the flip side, I think you mentioned it before, is also I literally got 2 days ago a call from an uncle of mine who was always against Bitcoin, and now all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, I want to get into Bitcoin," and I was like, "Oh, why you are always so against it?" He's like, "My bank advisor is now into Bitcoin, and now I'm getting fear of missing out." And I'm like, "Oh," it's like he needed that kind of permission, like seeing someone that he trusted with money getting into Bitcoin, and that's where I'm like, I think BlackRock, and those can orange peel a lot of blabs and normies that we want to have. And it's not just like institutions and bigger money companies that they come into the game because of that.
I didn't realize your uncle was Peter Schiff. How funny was that when he showed up at the conference? You must have, I was on the floor laughing.
Yeah, and his talks were one of the most well-intended talks ever.
Exactly. But, it's kind of a turn. And I think this is what Bitcoiners sometimes get frustrated by. And I get it and I understand. But there's not one statement you can make, one example you can make, or one conversation you can make. It's, regular turns of the ratchet through time to get people to see our framing of the world. And that is a difficult endeavor to get people to distort their framing of the world and understand how you see things. But if you're good at that, over time, you'll be able to bring over just about everybody, which is what I try to do.
What are your thoughts on why Trump came into Bitcoin and what does this mean for Bitcoin?
I said this in a number of spaces leading up to that because you could see it happening, and maybe this comes from my experience in politics and running for office, and you'll understand the mechanics of message testing and how they ID voters, which is very key to modern politics to make elections more efficient, or at least more cost effective. I think what was happening was there became a buzz. There had been a buzz that had been growing for some time. The trucker convoy was very political, and it was Western and political. It was kind of that intersection of all of these things that we were discussing. And I think the lobby class understood that the Overton window had shifted to the point where it now included this new asset that they didn't understand, but that there was some global movement around it, meaning there is a voter base that they can exploit. I don't say exploit in a negative way. I'm saying in the political term. There is a voter base that they can exploit and get people on side. And what was interesting, you could see the right wing was better. By the way, I don't like right or left wings, but I don't like that framing. But we'll use it just for argument's sake. The right wing of the political structure, the Republican wing of the political structure, they seem to understand it. But the other side was trying to understand where that voting base was, and they all struggled because one of the biggest advantages of Bitcoin for me has been you have everybody from across the political spectrum or people who just don't care about politics, as we discussed previously. So it's allowed many of us to interact with each other after a decade of us, pushing ourselves into these silos and echo chambers, that now finally through Bitcoin, we could have conversations with people we disagree with and say, yeah, okay, we disagree on ABC, but I agree on Bitcoin and freedom and basic principles and whatever. So that becomes a challenge for the political class to identify, is this new movement, is that voting bloc going to be more on one side of the political spectrum or on the other side of the political spectrum? And what they didn't understand is for all sides, which is what I've been trying to communicate to people within the political class.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.